Hi, I'm Andy Parkin, Managing Director of the multi-award-winning Sulphate Screed. I'm here to talk about calcium sulphate. Calcium sulphate is the name of the binder that is in the screed. So traditionally, all screeds generally have or are cement-based. With this one, it's an exception, and it has what is termed as a calcium sulphate, which is generally produced by a byproduct of the chemical industry. And so rather than going to landfill, it gets milled and then is produced and made available to the screeding industry. It certainly has a number of benefits over cement, and we'll just kind of go over a few of those benefits. One of which would be low shrinkage. So anything with water in will shrink as it dries. In this case, it's not going to shrink as much. So even though it's a fluid material, it's a liquid product in nature, and it's got a lot of water in there, so you'd imagine the shrinkage is going to be greater than a traditional sand and cement screed. But that's not the case. So it's actually less shrinkage. So less shrinkage means that there's less chance that it's going to crack through shrinkage cracking. It's not guaranteed it'll never crack, but you've got less shrinkage in there. So we've also got larger bay areas as well. So because the shrinkage is lower, we can actually have larger bay areas. Now there's obvious advantages to that, less cuts. A traditional screed, you would normally not go over bay size of 40 square metres. That's assuming an aspect ratio of 2 to 1. Anything more elongated, anything where you put in restraints in there, then that figure has got to come down. The bay sizes with calcium sulphate in comparison are massive. So if it's got underfloor heating in, you're looking at 300 square metres. At a 2 to 1 aspect ratio, again, no restraints in there. Without underfloor heating, you're actually looking at 1,000 square metres. So, you know, that's really massive. The implications for floor coverings and protection of those joints, again, are massive, really. Because if you're trying to work around those particular joints, there's implications. The joints are weaker. You know, there's problems with the floor coverings, maybe matching up with those particular joints. So you take away a lot of the headache with that. So how quickly can you actually traffic? Well, 24-48 hours is the recommended time. It'll depend really on site conditions. So you don't always know whether it's going to take all the 48 hours. Quite often, I would say kind of 90% of the time you can traffic after 24 hours. One of the other things that happen or can happen in screed, in conventional screed, cement-based screed, is if it's unbonded or it's a floating construction on insulation. You can experience curling. So if you imagine, I kind of like to liken it to a slice of bread. So if you leave a slice of bread on the side for, you know, a couple of days, it'll start to dry out and the edges curl up. And that's pretty much what happens with the screed. It can dry, and then you can get the curling and the lipping that you sometimes see. That won't happen with calcium sulphate screeds. So that's something reassuring to know that you're not having to deal with that. One other thing that we sometimes do to minimise shrinkage cracking is to place reinforcement. But as you can see, with calcium sulphate, that's not actually required because the shrinkage is minimised anyway. So we're reinforcing a screed to minimise that actual shrinkage cracking. Because the screed is a recycled product as well, it's very eco-friendly. So that's something that right now is very prevalent. The carbon footprint of cement is actually massive. So to have a product that can produce the same kind of results is something really that we should use more and more if possible. So what kind of flexibility do you have with calcium sulphate? With it being a liquid screed, it means that it's always got to be pumped in. You can actually pump up to a distance with a standard screed pump, 200 linear meters. That will vary if you kind of go in 200 meters upwards, but generally 200 meters along the floor is absolutely fine. So that gives you a great degree of flexibility. So truck mixer arrives, discharges into the pump then pumps through a worm sort of screw fed system. So it's the screw that's actually pushing the screed through the pipes, and then to the area where the screed is to be laid. So it's very flexible in that respect. It's very flexible from the point of view if you've got site constraints. So you might be working in an inner city, you haven't got a lot of area, you might want to pull up on the road, and literally this can be discharged very, very quickly. As you can see, 20 cubic meters can be discharged in an hour typically from a typical screed pump. So 20 cubic meters, that's a lot of screed. Just to put that into perspective, 6 cubic meters, so that would be an 8 meter ready mix truck with a capacity of 6 meters when carrying calcium sulphate. Because it's the drums at that angle, the screed will level itself off. So of course, if you end up going up a hill, the screed comes out the back of the truck. So an 8 meter truck will generally carry 6 for that reason. So 6 cubic meters at a depth of 50 mil will actually give you a coverage of 120 square meters. And you can discharge that in something like 20 minutes. And probably total finishing is going to be within the hour. Of course, it's all about the preparation. It's setting the everything up beforehand, making sure insulation, making sure membranes, making sure edging strips, making sure everything's right, making sure the levels are suitable, finding out where the datums are. So when you're actually screeding on the day, everything then runs really smoothly. So it's all in the preparation really. So because of this flexibility, we can do greater volumes. So depending on the shape of the building, the number of rooms, etc., we can do 1,500 square meters in a day, maybe more. It really depends on the supplier as well. Are they able to service the particular job? So that's another consideration to make. The product is a clean product. And when I say clean, from the perspective that you're not putting the product on the ground, it's coming in the truck mixer, into the pump, and delivered to the area where you're actually screeding. So there's very little waste because you're generally ordering what you need specifically for it. There's going to be washout, so you do need an area where you can actually place the screed afterwards for the washout. So there will be certainly washout. But it is very clean. What would normally happen with the screed, where the pump is, they would normally put a membrane underneath the pump just to make sure that the screed, if it does spill over, it doesn't get onto the area where the screed pump is. And finally, probably one of the biggest sells for the product is if you're using it with underfloor heating, because the thermal conductivity is nearly twice that of a traditional sand and cement screed. So it's really all about the density. So what isn't very thermally efficient is air and transferring the heat through air, whereas if you've got a solid dense screed, the thermal conductivity is going to be a lot better. So that's again one of the big benefits from the product. So that's calcium sulphate. If there's anything, any questions that you have, please just get in touch.